there was the scoop of the 60s and 70s, but, and a lot of people refer to them because, of that time, simply because that's within their lifetime. There was a whole process in the 50s, and I think a lot more children were picked up, between the mid-50s and into the mid-60s. Personally, myself, I went in 55 into foster care, and at that time they were just coming into where foster care was, what they called relief at that time after the war, was just coming into play. And Aboriginal people, first of all, weren't a part of the social service system because they were hunters and gatherers. Prior to war. It wasn't until after they came back and the situation, with there's a number of situations. One with the land, the one with the restrictions of reserves and land base, and the economic base that they needed to survive. And that was the time with my family, and those returning from war. The soldiers were given a quarter section of land. So there was no more, how would you say, free land anymore. And people like my father who had a homestead, they couldn't maintain it. And as a result, they went to living on road allowances, along the side of the roads where Crown land was, on reserves. And they had to try to make a living. And most of them were uneducated, and didn't have the money, to be farmers. So they became trappers, hunters and gatherers again. And that's how most of the people in my community at that time lived. They were all hunters and trappers, and that meant leaving home for a long period of time. We lived off wild meat, and and our community was very tight. It wasn't till probably around the mid-50s or early 50s is when alcohol started coming into the community. And the minute alcohol came into the community, then there was less care for the children. And when that started happening, that's when social services started making the move, because people in the community would see that the children were not taken care of. In my case, my mother died when I was very young. And my father had 8 children, and he was a trapper. So the oldest one, which was my sister Maria, used to take care of us. Dad would bring ladies in to take care of us, usually through friends, because he couldn't afford to pay them. And they'd stay a while. But trying to take care of 8 kids and 3 of them just barely, 2 of them still in diapers and the rest of us were barely out of diapers, was a tough call. And lack of food, lack of resources, to the grocery stores and everything. We were maybe 20 miles to the nearest store. And Dad would be gone for, a couple of months at a time on the trap line trying to make a living. So a lot of children were picked up. A lot of communities came apart and they moved into centers, towns, because that was where relief was. That was where social services sent the checks out from. And as a result of that, alcohol started playing a big part in their life, and they started losing their children. And so I'd say the scoop started in the 50s, because a lot of us went into foster care. And in those group homes, it wasn't group homes till the early 60s, but in those foster homes, we were taken in as workers. The people used us, like farmhands. I remember getting moved 2 or 3 times a year based on the work. The springtime we'd be picking rocks, picking roots, and then there was a planting season, the gardens and everything else, and then there was a harvest. The winter time, sometimes you'd run into good foster homes, but most of them were like labor camps. It was fantastic. The government paid these people to take us in, and they worked us. We worked hard. I remember one place I was in for a year and a half before I even saw a town. All I did was clean pig pens. So it wasn't a good time for foster kids because there wasn't policy in place, that they were still working on it. There was really, they relied on the people who took these foster kids of treating them fairly. And in a lot of cases that didn't happen. There was a lot of abuse, not only to myself, but, to other kids that I saw. The beatings and the things that took place. And a lot of it, we came out of the bush and we couldn't speak English. Personally myself, I spoke Cree, Mechiff, and French. English, well, you seldom heard it. So when you moved into these places, they were all usually European people. Native people were never looked at as being foster parents in those days. So you went into these places, and as much as anybody, even today, I see that in fostering, as much as you care about being a foster parent, that child that comes in is not your child. That child knows it, and so do you. It's plain and simple. So there is going to be upheaval in the first few years. You haven't had a chance to raise that child, to give them the tools they need on behavior and all these other things. So what's expected of foster parents is expecting a lot, but it's also expecting a lot from the foster child too, because they know who their parents are. And they come with a lot of mental health problems. And once they're in the foster care system, that system creates a lot of mental health problems also. So what may start out as a child being good, it don't take long for a child to hate themselves, to see themselves as different, and to have low self-esteem, and to give up. I work a lot in prisons now, and I'd say 75% of the people inside of prisons are foster care. It is huge. But even to this day, government doesn't want to look at that. They don't want to look at the mental health issues that they created, or the mental health issues that were created by a system that they put in place that doesn't work. And what is the solution? The solution is working with those families. And we don't need to have foster care per se as it is today. What takes place of taking the child away, that only creates more problems. What we need to do is start looking at the social problems that our people have, the drugs, the alcohol. Why does a family break down? And why does a father not stick around, and leave it upon the woman, the mother, to be both father and mother? Those are social problems brought on by society. And the ones who pay the price are the children. And as a result of going through that system, they grow up angry, they grow up hateful. I did. And I spent a lot of time in institutions, and I spent a lot of time striking out at what I believed caused that.